All right, I'm fresh out of that expert exchange with Dr. Sasson, and I wanted to talk about the life of the Buddha. Um, you asked what role the life of the Buddha might play in Buddhist practices then and now, and I can only talk about it from my own perspective and how I see the story. And Dr. Sasson asked at the beginning of her talk what really stood out. And to me, the biggest thing about the story that stood out to me this time of hearing it was the fact that the Buddha became enlightened when he was 35. And it made me wonder about coming of age and different stages and different moments in your life when you kind of move to the next level as far as awakening is concerned. I've spoken about it before with you, Dr. Clayton, about a vision quest or a spiritual quest at that coming of age time when you're kind of transitioning from childhood to adulthood in your early 20s, or for some earlier, some a little bit later, and how there's some revelations that can be had at that time, but the story doesn't really end. And it kind of showed in the story of the Buddha and how he didn't attain that state until he was 35, but he had other epiphanies and revelations before that. I was also, a little bit taken off that understanding during her lecture when she talked about the notions of the Buddha being a supreme being from day one, that the Buddha chose his own path, and how much consciousness he had of this throughout his life. But I really try to see these stories as allegorical, whether a figure like this existed or not. With that much time passing between now and when it happened, all the different additions and changes to the story are something to be taken with a grain of salt. I did a little math here with help of the internet. There's about 33 generations between now and the time of the Buddha 2,500 years ago. And it doesn't mean that there's been consecutive 80-year-old lives piled on top of each other. These are generations that live together. Like right now, you might be able to say that you have 3 generations living at once, or at one point in my life, there was 5 generations in my family alive at once, and we took a picture together. So it's just how much time has passed. The story's going to be changed and manipulated for the different cultures and times and people that needed those stories. And I think these type of archetypal hero's journey and path to enlightenment stories are very important, and it gives you a way to relate to someone else's struggle with notions of suffering and these other challenges that through adversity breeds character and often compassion and understanding of other people's journeys and paths, and taking yourself outside of your own ego and your own suffering, and understanding that it's something we're all in together. But also the fact that through these revelations that the Buddha had, there are also techniques on how to ease the suffering of yourself and others, and there are noble paths that can be taken that make one's life more meaningful and more impactful. And the notion of the idea that we're all kind of the same manifestation of a being going through the same journey over time, and that each manifestation has its own set of teachings and thresholds that we make our way through, and worrying about which one we're at is not necessarily beneficial to the progress. And understanding that those numbers, those milestones might be different for each person. Maybe when I'm 35, I don't escape samsara, but someone else might at 15, and maybe it's all about the approach, not so much about the results, because for all we know, we wake up after death and they say, look, you did it. The next one's enlightenment, so you get to pick who you come out of and where you end up and what kind of challenges you're going to face blindly, and this will lead to you becoming the Buddha and starting anew, following and momentum towards reduced suffering for more people. But it was definitely an enlightening talk, as well as the readings. You asked me to cite specifically from the readings. I read them. I don't know. These ideas are too big for me to pick through and cite specific passages for this particular activity. I more wanted to relate to my own personal interest and application of the story of the life of the Buddha, and how I can understand it to maybe help other people as they're growing and learning and experiencing the suffering and challenges of the world. And like Dr. Sasson said, it's you could pick each individual part of these stories, and just like you do in Christianity or Judaism or any other folk tradition, you pick them apart, and those become individual sermons and topics of discussion that you can build upon and offer up as utility for those who are listening. And you can internalize it yourself in different ways and different times, and you might hear the same story 100 times, and each time you hear it, it helps you and changes you for the better in a different way. And I think that's what's beautiful about the story of the Buddha, and I think that's why it's still around after 2,500 years, is because it's so applicable to the human experience. And that's how I saw it. I hope this suffices. I took the time to take some great notes and really take some time to have some thoughtful reflections on who Siddhartha Gautama was, and what that story has changed into and facilitated over these hundreds and hundreds of years. So thank you for introducing me to Dr. Sasson, and thank you for providing me with the material to read. And I'll keep looking into it. Just as a quick aside, another part of today's talk with Dr. Sasson that moved me a bit was the naming of the Buddha's son, Rahula, and the meaning of it being obstacle. Again, on the notion of me being 35 and not quite there yet in terms of my ability to manage my own thoughts and intentions and cravings and desires in this physical world. I wonder if I ought to have abandoned my wife and son at the age of 25 and seek enlightenment for the greater good, or if my choice was more courageous and arguably more effective to attempt it with them as obstacles by my side. I often say that adversity breeds character, and there seemed to have been a compression for Siddhartha that he was sheltered for much of his life, and then all at once, this compression of life's realities were thrust upon him, and that forced him to deal with it all at once, and that might have been the reason for his success in coming up with a doctrine and a set of rules and examples that others could follow. But there's other paths, being born into a world of realities where you are unsheltered and unprotected is more like an IV drip of reality, where it's a constant flow and you have a chance to adapt and understand these sufferings and human flaws and the necessities of life's obligations. And again, just I appreciate that the story of the life of the Buddha exists, but I don't pretend that notions such as how they viewed the female body, or the fact that you have to abandon your family is necessarily the only way to go about it, and I think that's okay. So I just wanted to mention it really quickly, and I'm sure my wife and son appreciate my sacrifice, and I don't see it as a sacrifice because in my mind the type of revelations that come with being a father and a loving, devoted husband are far greater than what I could get sitting under the Bodhi tree and starving myself to death, or starving myself to ribs and spinal protrusions without dying. But that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.